Welcome to the Bookish Hour with your hosts, Sarah E. Burr and J.C. Kenney. And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Bookish Hour. I am Sarah Burr.
And I am J.C. Kenney, and happy Baby Friday evening, everybody. We've got a wonderful show for you here because we have an even more wonderful friend and writer joining us here this evening. So, Sarah, I think it's time to get bookish.
Yes, and I definitely need to talk mystery and murder tonight. I don't know about you, but it's just something that brings such joy to my life that I love, true crime, fake crime,
Cheers.
all of it. Just I can't wait to dive in. And the book that we'll be chatting about tonight, you guys, is super, super special. You may recognize our wonderful friend, Linda Norlander, who has joined us here for Bookish Hours and Bookish Moments before. Linda has actually gone into a new direction with her writing. Although, as we were talking before the show, this particular project is something that Linda has been working on for a very, very long time, even before she started writing her Cabin by the Lake mysteries. And so she's moved from this cozy amateur sleuth to something much, much more darker, grittier, atmospheric. I love it. It's just right up my alley. So I can't wait to talk more. And hello to our wonderful viewers who are joining us live in chat. We've got Farmhouse Reader saying good evening, DHB saying it's Thursday, hello, and Sawdust saying good evening to all. So we thank you guys for being here. And Linda, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me. I'm very excited to talk with you. It's been a while.
It has.
Maybe a year or two, maybe.
Yeah, I think the last time that you were on, we were talking of your new Mrs. Wilkinson series.
Okay.
And that fun gold cat cover, which I absolutely loved, doing paw prints for on your bookmarks. So we've got a lot to catch up on in your writing world. We've got Sharon also chiming in with a hello. Hi, Sharon. Thanks for being here. So folks, the book that we're going to be talking about tonight, the name alone will send chills down your spine. It is called And the Lake Will Take Them.
That's not ominous.
Number one, need to know this title, Linda. You love lakes, I think. That's something that that comes up in your writing quite frequently. How did you come up with this particular title? Even before we really get into the book itself, like that title alone, I was like, that's a great title. Where did it come from?
It actually came from, there are pieces in the book where it takes place in the winter, and there's a snowstorm and a snowmobile on the lake. And one of the things about snowmobiling is that you have to be very careful. Lakes can be very treacherous. And as I was thinking about it, I was thinking, you do have to be careful, or that lake could open up and it will take you. Oof. And that's when the title came to me. I thought, that's it. The lake will take you.
It just evokes so many images, almost like, and again, for those of you folks who don't know, Linda is based in Minnesota, writes Minnesota-based stories. So when you're feeling cold reading her books, it's because she's the real deal there as far as the Minnesota weather goes. But it's like it brings that whole kind of almost myth of Minnesota weather having power over us puny humans.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I really wanted to make sure I wrote into the book was the fact that winter is a character. Mm. It is so important to what happens in the book that, and I love writing about winter because it is so dynamic.
So if you could, Linda, set the scene a little bit for our readers and the lake will take them. This is first in a brand new series, which is called the Sheriff Red Mysteries. Book 1, which is coming out March 26th. So it's almost less than 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Mark your calendar, folks. Well, don't even mark your calendars. Just go pre-order it right now.
You can just go on and pre-order.
Yeah.
So set the scene. Tell us who is Sheriff Red, and about the community that Sheriff Red oversees.
Okay. It's set in a northern Minnesota community, not the Northwoods. Like my other books are set in the Northwoods of Minnesota. It's sort of somewhere in between. It isn't the beautiful piney woods. And it's a kind of a hardscrabble county that Sheriff Red is in charge of. Economically struggling. And Sheriff Red became sheriff after she married the current sheriff, who was the son of the previous sheriff, who was the son of the previous sheriff.
Oh, it's a dynasty.
It was a dynasty, a dynasty. And unfortunately, her husband, who she loved very deeply, died of cancer. And one of his dying wishes was that she take over being sheriff. She'd been a deputy. I used that, or I did that, because in this particular community, it would be difficult for a woman to be simply elected sheriff. I mean, we're talking about a community that's pretty traditional and pretty stuck in the 1950s, 1960s. And she jokes with her friend. She said, well, the only reason I got elected was because they thought I was a Hammergren. They didn't know I was a woman, which may or may not be true. But so Red does have, I mean, she's got challenges in working in that community, but she loves it. And the people that she works with and the sense of the community is deep in her being.
When I first met Red or where I saw that it was a Sheriff Red mystery, I was like, oh, like that must be her last name. But then after reading about kind of the lineage that she comes from, it's like, oh, it makes sense that like folks, that the sheriffs are known by their first name, because it's like, what Hammergren are we talking about here?
Right.
And it was very, very interesting. And Linda, you may not know this. Our last guest that we had on our Bookish Hour, Winter Austin, she wrote about a female sheriff who was just kind of like elected into the position without even having been on the force, or like she just kind of ran as a private citizen. So I was like, oh, like, you know, Red has experience of being a deputy. She really kind of looks back on that when she is assessing crime scenes or when she's working with, victims' families and such. So she really has that layered background and that experience that makes her, I think, a really good sheriff for the circumstances that her county is going through.
Thank you. I agree with you. I wanted to give her that depth of experience. Backstory with Red is that she grew up in this community. She left for a while and became a junior high science teacher. And every once in a while, that experience helps her in dealing with some of the situations that come up. And particularly in this book where a teenage girl is missing, and she has to be able to relate to her friends and still, know how to talk with them and still be sheriff.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of which, perfect segue, thank you very much. One of the other characters we meet very early in the book is a high school student named Missy. And so can you tell us a little bit about, as we, like Sarah said, we're meeting Sheriff Red. Tell us what's going on in Missy's life that brings her to the forefront of the story.
Missy has had a very difficult life. She's 16 years old. Her mother was a drug addict who died within, the last 4 or 5 months. And her father was found dead a few years ago in what was thought to be a hunting accident. And that's one of the pieces of this, is that Red is not convinced that there was an accident. And Missy has gotten herself into trouble. And she has some information, some knowledge that there are some very bad people who do not want her to have. And she's on the run
Oof. And you
in
think,
Minnesota.
yeah, and you
In the winter.
Winter.
in the
Yeah.
winter, and you think so. The thing that I really love about how you kind of pull the reader deeper and deeper into the story and to the community is, we meet Missy, we know that she has the secret that she has, and I'm thinking like, okay, something's gonna happen to Missy, and then Red is doing some research, and like there's some other like weird coincidences that she's like, these are too coincidental that are happening around town. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, like something's definitely going to happen to Missy. Yet when we have our big fire scene, which I want to talk about how you wrote that scene, because there were definitely some parts of it that I was like, this is something that only like somebody in Minnesota would know to do. We're drawn into a mystery that I was like completely surprised by. It was like, I didn't expect the victims to be who they were. And I love being surprised like that. So I would love to know, Linda, when you were, kind of think back to when you were first toying with this idea. Was the mystery itself the core focal point for you when you were crafting everything? Or was it really the character of Red that you wanted to kind of put into these scenarios and figure out like what's going to happen? Because I loved how everything linked up together in a very surprising way.
I think it was a combination of both. As I think back to writing the book, the first thing that comes to mind is that I wanted to have a female sheriff in that setting. I also wanted to have a person that she needs to sort of rescue, a person in danger. And I do love writing teenagers. They fascinate me. So I think Missy was probably almost born before Red.
Oh,
I wanted a teenager, and Red sort of evolved as Missy's story evolved.
that's really cool.
And that's fascinating, because at least for me, one of the things that I think is both my kids are grown, they're out of the house now, but trying to write convincing teenagers, when I think back to my kids, that's a tall order, and you not only met the bar, Linda, you exceeded the bar. So
Thank you.
good on you there. But one of the things that I kind of like to ask about Missy's predicament is that it kind of ties into this ritual that, again, early in the book, Red participates in, because it's something that her husband and then his dad did that kind of works into the story as well. So could you talk a little bit about that, the ritual, and how that plays into the larger story we have here?
The book actually opens up, or the Red part of the book opens up with, once a year, it's been a tradition in the Hammergren Sheriff's dynasty to sit down with the unsolved cases and review them, the cold cases, the ones that they are no longer investigating. And I wrote that because I love the idea of cold cases, and I love the idea of her going back through and trying trying to find out, is there new evidence? Can we do something more with this? And it turns out, of course, that one of the cold cases is the unsolved shooting of Missy's father in what was determined by another investigator to be a hunting accident. And again, Red is skeptical. So, as she at this point does not know that Missy is actually in a lot of trouble, but it kind of sets the scene, or sets the scene for what's going to happen next.
I am just thinking, if every sheriff's department did this ritual where they sat down and reviewed like their cold cases every year, like maybe we wouldn't have so many cold cases. And I will freely admit to our viewership, I have been on this wild binge of true crime podcasts that are all based on innocent projects, like are people who have been wrongfully imprisoned. And so it was really, really refreshing for me, Linda, to be with a investigator in Sheriff Red who really cared about doing a good job and being and getting it right. Because I've been shocked by how many prosecutors and how many police departments are more concerned with closing the case than getting it right. And one of the things that I was like, wow, like she's a really good sheriff, is when she receives this call about a fire. So she's been alerted there's a fire out at a property. And the first thing she does is she makes sure that she calls a snowplow. And I can't ever remember coming across a crime scene where it's like, we need to bring a snowplow out to it too. And where you mentioned the fact that like, okay, that we have Winter as being a character in the story, I was like, this is a moment that I was really, I was like, that's very, very interesting. So I have to ask, do people in Minnesota have to call for snow plows to attend these crime scenes with the police and like the fire departments because of like they may be needed?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the reality is, if you have a snowstorm, your sheriff's equipment, you might have a great four-wheel drive. It's probably still not going to get through the snow. And the same with the fire engine. So you need to plow out the road for the fire engine to get to the fire. And of course, Red knows her county. So she knew where this cabin was, and she knew that there wasn't any way that anybody was going to be able to drive into it.
That I think that's so funny. And I would love to know, I know we have a lot of folks from Maine in our audience, because that is my home state and I'm lucky to have folks that support me from there. I would love to know. I don't even remember in Maine that happening. But maybe we didn't have those types of incidents when the snow was really high. I just thought that was such like a cool touch that really brought me into the scene of like, we need the fire department and we need a snow plow. I'm like, those are two very different vehicles for emergency response.
So just as a point of clarification, though, the snow plow is not there to use to plow the snow into the building to put the fire out.
No.
Right. It's oh, sure. That's how we do it in Minnesota in the winter. We just plow right in with the snow and fix it.
Bury it in the snow. That'll put it out.
That might work. Would that seems like it would just work though.
I wouldn't dare say one way or the other. I can think of one instance where one of the things that happens in the winter, or not even in the winter, but anyway, I'm thinking about this happening in the winter, chimney fires. lot of wood-fired stoves and things like that. And I remember when a neighbor of ours had a chimney fire and thought, oh, okay, well, I'll just get up on the roof and I will shovel snow in, which is absolutely the wrong thing to do. And I can't remember scientifically why, but had he done it, he would have burned down his whole house.
Whoa.
As it turned out, he was smart enough to call the fire department and they got the chimney fire out. And I honestly don't remember why you don't do that, but I know you don't. So
I'm going to have to look that up because...
Yeah. It just really brings up an interesting question. Well, of course, since it's in my mind, I think it's an interesting question, but a question that, for purposes of storytelling, I live in the Midwest. Sarah lives in the Northeast. So we're not unfamiliar with what we consider to be severe winter weather. However, what you have there in Minnesota is a completely different animal. And I have a nephew and his family, they live in Minneapolis. And they were talking about one day it being, it was going to be like -30.
Yeah.
And so, can you talk a little bit? You mentioned that, winter is a character. What's it like? I mean, how do you, because honestly, when the weather gets bad here in Indianapolis, it's like all bad stuff stops happening because everybody's too cold to do anything. And so, it just fascinates me that, to your story in particular, that, it doesn't matter that it's winter, a barn's on fire, you got to do something about it.
You've got to deal with it. That's right. That's right. And winter is a character, I think, particularly in this story, there's a, for Red, there's a love-hate relationship with winter. January, she's always depressed. I mean, it's the season of the dark and it's cold and it's going to stay cold. But on the other hand, she loves getting out and cross-country skiing in the pristine snow and the quiet. I mean, there's something very meditative about being out in the woods, cross-country skiing in the winter. I think of that oftentimes as a little bit of a happy place for me. But winter is also a villain. And in this case, it's the snow, the cold, the lake, the ice, all of those things. It's almost like they're conspiring to keep Missy from being safe.
Ooh, I like
And I love the idea of the allure of the winter, and then the evil that's there too.
Winter is a villain is a really cool way to describe it. Another thing, and maybe you can kind of help paint this picture for us, Linda. I think I will be the first. I've never been to Minnesota before, so I have vague concepts of it. But you had mentioned like there are different, like you have the North Woods area, and then you mentioned like the Pine Woods area. Like what are how are these all like differentiated? Like how do these, like how have these unique places like sprung up and are distinguished between folks that live in Minnesota?
Well, the real Northwoods, where I set the Cabin by the Lake series, is very forested, lots of lakes. Its economy was logging. A lot of it was logging, and now a lot of it is tourism. And then there's sort of the in-between area, and that's where Red is in Pearsall County. They have the Northwoods and some beautiful pines and things like that, but also it's agricultural.
Okay.
There are fields and there are farmers, and so it's sort of a transition area. And then there's southern Minnesota, where one of my books will be coming out that's set in southern Minnesota, and that's agricultural.
Okay.
And I think probably, Jim, that might be for you a lot like you're in Indiana, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That there's a variety of landscapes.
Yeah, I think I could handle southern Minnesota. You get much farther north than that. And Sarah, this is before your time. But to give you an idea and give folks who may not be quite as seasoned as I am, back in the 70s, there was a Sears Die Hard car battery commercial where, where they literally, the commercial is they took a car, they put it in the middle on a frozen lake in International Falls, Minnesota, left it there all winter, and then after spending who knows how long out there, then they went out and the thing fired right up to show you how strong of a battery it was and how brutal, because International Falls, and Linda, feel free to correct me, but that is a lot of times that's set the records for the coldest spot in the United States.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Also known as
gosh.
Frostbite Falls.
Frostbite, okay.
Well, I mean, you said -30, and I was just like, no.
Oh, yes.
Like, I don't know. That just seems. I think I got to like maybe -16 when I was visiting Maine up in December, and I was like, this is cold. But you just go about your day, and it amazes me. Oh.
I have to tell you, I had we had a time of maybe 4 or 5 days of below 20 below weather, and we got very excited when it got up to 15 below.
Oh,
it was
man.
like, oh, it's warming up.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
I mean, and not that, because I want to, and I'm sure Sarah does too. We want to talk about the book and talk about you, Linda, because you're wonderful. How do you cope? And I realize you live there, but how do you cope when it's that cold?
First of all, you learn to dress for it. Dress in layers. And secondly, you try to stay indoors as much as you can. I mean, that's the reality. And the third thing is that, and I don't know, it's been a number of years since I actually don't live in Minnesota anymore. I live in Seattle, so I haven't experienced this in a while. But our car had a heater that you plugged in. And that kept things warm enough so it would start in the morning. And I remember being late for work and backing out of the driveway and thinking there's something wrong here. And I looked and I was pulling the extension cord that I had ripped out of the wall because I'd forgotten to unplug it.
I can imagine that probably happens a great deal.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to kind of, still talking about Minnesota, but talking about this fictional town that you've created, Linda. Lycan Lake, spelled I am blanking. Lykken. I-N. See,
That's on the end.
You're doing fine.
It's a made-up place.
Yes.
Where did this name come from? Because I had a really hard time spelling it, and I would love to know, like, how, where did it appear? How did Lycan Lake come to be?
Well, of all the questions you could ask me, that's probably one of the hardest because honest to God, I do not know where it came from. I don't know. And I think this is something that as authors, sometimes it pops up. There is something, a name or a place or something that just pops up and says, I'm it. I do not. I honestly don't know. I wish I
I
could remember where I got it.
I totally am with you on that answer. I do want to let you know that we have farmhouse readers saying, I can take freezing cold temps as long as there is sun and not any wind.
Yeah,
So that's
that
having the sun out is definitely a big help. But I'm thinking of, oh gosh, I've made up so many names in across my various series. Some of them I think I know what they sound like in my head and I write them out like, oh, that's what this word should be spelled like. But then my audiobook narrator gets to it and she'll pronounce it phonetically. And I'll be like, wow, I did not spell that word the way that
I did not mean that.
should have. And because I really like to use, I like to have like Z's and X's in my names. I don't know why. And there was one where I was trying to do something using the AUX ending so that it would be O sounding. But instead I added an E. I was AEUX first because I was like, oh, I'll just throw in another vowel and make it look fancy. And my audiobook narrator, she's like, Sarah, this is, she like sent me like how like these, it would be broken down and like with all the different like all the different markings that is like, I don't understand what this even means. I just thought it would be pronounced like this in my head. She's like, oh, okay. But yeah, they just come to us. And I'm curious, JC, have you ever, like, what are some names or places in your writing that have been like, you know what, I'm using it, but I'm not 100% sure where they came from?
You know, probably the first one that comes to mind would be Paradise Springs, Florida, for my Elmo Simpson books. I knew I wanted it to be in Florida, and I wanted it to kind of have some kind of fancy, you know, oh, I want to go there kind of thing, and it just kind of came to me. You know, some of the other names for my series, I kind of had ideas that came from something, but that one just came to me, and I even went ahead and Googled to make sure that it hadn't already been taken, and there is no real life Paradise Springs, Florida. So
I'm surprised because it's a good name for a place in Florida.
Yeah, that worked out. So, Sarah, what about you? I mean, there's Zaltor, and then there's
oh gosh, don't even get me started on the stuff in my Court of Mystery series. Like everything is made up, and it's usually I take like each country has like a language that I sort of root some of their words in, and I'll go from there. But the one that for me that is always the hardest to answer is the name Glenmeyer. I have no idea where that was from. And like, that's like that's the basis of my series is this Glenmeyer family. It's like, who the heck are the Glenmeyers? And, and I know that it's a weird name because the different ways that people have pronounced it, it's like, oh, this is something that nobody's ever come across before. So, that's one that I think is always like, I have no idea where it came from at all. Like, could not tell you. So, Linda, you are not better. You are in good company in that respect. And we've also got some folks chiming into the chat. DHB saying, when I was a kid, we loved when it got to 0 or below because the lightweights would get off the mountain and we'd be able to ski onto the lifts with no waiting.
Yeah.
So that's somebody that is very, very familiar with or being able to brave the cold for the love of skiing. And then Sharon says, not much sun in Minnesota and usually wind, which makes the wind chill much colder than the actual temp. So, oh gosh, wind chill. That's like my nemesis when it comes to weather being a villain. Oh, I can't stand wind.
You know, so let's stop talking about wind and let's talk about something else, a little more picturesque.
Yes.
You know, you mentioned that, Linda, that Red likes to cross-country ski. And when I think of cross-country skiing, and I picture it in my mind, it very much evokes that, you know, being at one with nature. It's quiet. You know, you're by yourself. There's solitude. You know, as somebody who has cross-country skied, though, I can't help but wonder, it's at least I've kind of always gotten the impression that's a workout too.
Oh, yes.
So, you know, can you talk a little bit about those of us who have never cross country skied. What's it like? Because it really, I mean, it sounds like really it's kind of like hockey in Minnesota. It's woven into the culture.
It is. It is. What is it like? Well, you are absolutely right that it's a lot of work. And one of the things that I had to learn when I started cross-country skiing, uh, besides not falling over, was how to dress for it, because you work up a sweat. It could be 15 below zero. And you are just working your body, and you're warm, you're hot. But cross country skiing, there are two ways of cross country skiing. There's the skate skiing, which the racers like to do. It's much faster. And then there's the regular track skiing, which is what I loved, and that's what I loved, because you could take those tracks into the woods. And boy, as I talk about it, I realize how much I miss it. Not much cross country skiing here in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the hills, but
No snow.
yeah.
I will say that when the concept of cross country skiing was first introduced to me, I think when I was in fourth grade, my school had this like program where it was a field trip where we all went to the local. It was called the Snow Bowl. We all went to the local snow bowl to either learn how to ski, or if we already knew how to ski, we could, just have like free ski time and go up and down the mountain. I had never skied before, and that was the only time that I went skiing because it was so traumatizing for me. Oh God, I still have nightmares about it to this day. But when I learned about cross country skiing, I was like, you know what, that seems like something I could do. And then I realized like how hard it is. And in my mind, it doesn't make sense why it's so hard to just like ski across, like on the ski. Like it seems like it should be something that would be really effortless and like, oh, I'm just gliding, but you're not.
You're not.
And I don't understand physics and all of that stuff enough to like really know it. But I've always wanted to do it because I can't downhill ski. So maybe that's something that I have to experience in my life. Do you have any tips, Linda, for first time cross country skiers? What should people be wary of?
Oh, wary of. I think for a first time cross country skier, make sure you're outfitted correctly with the right skis and the right boots. The first time that I went out and bought, these were old wooden skis that I bought. Now they're fiberglass and all sorts of fancy things. I got boots that were too small, and I ended up with frostbite on my toes. So
Nice.
so I would say make sure you go to somebody to get outfitted correctly.
That is a good, wise advice.
Yep, and don't try to race.
I will not think that highly of myself ever on skis. We also have DHB saying cross-country skiers should be wary of moose. Yeah, wildlife could definitely play a big factor. Linda, I'm looking at the time, and our hour is rapidly coming to a close together. So
Not on the clock behind Linda. Behind Linda, it's like we got an hour and a half still because it's only it's only 6:30 there.
So we can just keep going.
Yeah.
I would love as we're kind of talking about, and the lake will take them. There are a lot of different themes that are at play in this piece. Kind of tell us, you said that you started writing this long before you had even kind of ventured into writing your amateur sleuth stories. What are some of the biggest takeaways, or what was the experience like putting this writing this book, and then now seeing it come full circle and having it out in the world?
It's certainly very exciting to have it come out in the world. I had written many different versions of it over the years, and then I put it away. And I put it away for a number of years and decided, it's worthy. I think I will bring it out and see what will happen. It was a challenge, and I wanted the challenge to my other books are all written in first person, and that's pretty typical for amateur sleuth, cozy-ish, is that it's coming from the protagonist's voice. And I wanted to be able to get inside the heads of more than one person. Actually, you as authors probably know this, that's a real challenge. But it was a real creative, I'm using the word challenge too much. It was, I think the word, it was kind of fun to have a couple different characters that are all part of the story and weave that all together and try to make them realistic and try to make them in a way that they don't all sound the same.
And that kind of along that line, one of the things I'm curious about also is, so from the beginning to, now, that's a long time. Did you have to go back and do a lot of rewriting as time passed? How did that process work?
Absolutely. I think when I first sat down to write Sheriff Red, we didn't have laptops. Things were very different. But the other thing is that in writing the other books that I've written, I've learned a lot more about plotting and story development and things like that. So I could go back, and it was like the book that I originally wrote was almost like the outline, that zero draft that you want to throw away. And now I could use some of the experience that I've had in putting together stories and make it a deeper, richer story.
Your process, Linda, gives me hope, because I have a series that I wrote when I was in college that I thought was going to be, the greatest thing since Twilight. And I quickly found out that, like, wow, I didn't know how to write a book, but I have it done. And I would love one day to be able to take it out and work on it, and revisit with everything that I have since learned. When you started revisiting, how did you kind of keep away this is too overwhelming, or there's too much work to be done here, when I could be, writing the next Cabin by the Lake mystery, or I could be writing a new mystery, or what have you? What kept you going with the story? What kept you feeling that, yes, this is the one that I want to tell?
I think what kept me going is exactly what you said. This was the story I wanted to tell. But I needed to, when I finished the first draft of it, I'm thinking back now, I think it was 35,000 words. And I thought I had a complete book. Well, that tells you that there was a certain learning experience that goes with this. But this was the story I wanted to tell. So I needed to flesh it out. I needed to add characters. I needed to add to the story. And that kept me going. I like Sheriff Red. I do like her as a character.
I like her too. And to give our viewers some context of why JC and I both kind of giggled at 35,000 words being a complete book. When we are submitting our manuscripts, we're kind of contracted to, at least hit 70,000 words. Yes. If not, 75, 80,000. I'd love it if all my stories could be 35,000 words, which it could be if we wanted to write novellas. But I think, Sheriff Red's story, whatever magic you wove on it afterwards, those additional words really, really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And kind of along that line, this is a story. Red has gone through a lot in her life. And those are certainly universal themes that Sarah, you're a baby. No offense, you are young enough to be my kid. But as we go on through life, it's not all wine and roses, and Red is a personification of that. So I guess kind of that's my lead up to ask, what do you hope people take away from Red in particular, and her journey and this story?
Well, I think first of all, I hope that it's a kind of story that keeps you going. We all love to read books where you don't want to set it down. And those books don't always come. But I also think I want people to understand the importance of community. And I hope I was able to weave that into the story, the importance of community. And thirdly, it's really in the most serious manner, we watch Red as she's struggling with her grief. She was so in love with her husband, Will, and to have him die and to have to take over from him. And it was very important to me to weave that in and give the readers sort of a sense of what that's like.
It's such a poignant and like heartfelt love that she just like shares with us as readers. And it's so well done. It's so gripping. It's so atmospheric. You had mentioned, Linda, about the sense of community and how you really wanted to like make sure that like you had woven that in. I think that the Town Talk Cafe, like that would fit, like you could put that in any cozy mystery town and people would be like, that place is like the place to be. I loved that setting because it kind of just invoked that community spirit with everybody being in everybody's business. And there's so many, great characters within the town that we get to meet. Will we get to visit with them again in future Sheriff Red books?
Absolutely. The next Sheriff Red book that's coming out is called The Pines We're Watching.
Ooh.
Oh, man. That's not creepy. I'm a city kid. That already has me in a cold sweat.
That will be out this fall with many of the same characters coming back.
Oh,
and
awesome.
The Town Talk will be there.
Excellent. These titles, I'm just like, I'm a title person and I'm totally loving them. So folks, we have And the Lake Will Take Them is out March 26th. In little less than 2 weeks. You can buy it pre-order it wherever books are sold. We'll be able to pick it up wherever books are sold once that release day hits. And Linda, it's always so wonderful to catch up with you and see what you're working on. Sheriff Red, she's just so cool. I'm so glad that we got to meet her, and I'm so glad that you were able to share her with us. As we kind of begin to wrap up our session for the evening, do you have any books that you've read, podcasts, movies, TV shows that you've consumed lately that you'd like to share with our viewers as recommendations, or even ones to stay away from?
I have a couple that have really kind of stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is just about anything by William Kent Kruger.
Oh, yep.
The one that really sang to me was called The River We Remember, and it's set in southern Minnesota, and I just thought you put us right there at that time. I'm also reading a series by an author named Iona Wishaw. The first book in the series is called The Killer in King's Cove, and it takes place right after World War II in rural British Columbia.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
And have you read her?
I haven't even, no, I haven't heard of her.
Yeah, she's amazing, and just about anything by C.J. Box.
Those are,
And,
I love hearing new author recommendations because my to be read list is something I'm very proud of. So it's like, I just love adding folks onto it. So those are good recommendations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Sarah?
Oh, okay. For me, well, I was lucky enough to be on a plane for a long period of time traveling to London recently. So I had some fun going through their movie selection because I don't, as much as I love consuming media, I watch more TV shows than I do movies. So I was finally able to I watched Emilia Perez. That was like my one Oscar nomination experience. And I was really surprised by how much I loved it. I was very, I know there's like some controversy about it now, but I really thought it was a beautiful story. And I liked the musical aspect of it. The songs were very, very different than Wicked. But the music was fun and it was just, I really enjoyed it. I also watched Elvis, the Elvis biopic from, I think, a couple Oscar seasons ago. That was really amazing. I didn't really know anything about Elvis other than like kind of the thank you very much. But like learning about his life was like, it was so eye-opening. I was like, wow, like what an amazing human that he was. So I found that really, really fascinating. Reading wise, or podcast consuming wise, I am actually pulling them up on my phone right now because I just like discovered this new channel where I am listening to a bunch of stuff. Truer Crime. It's TRUER, where she kind of like along with like the unjustly convicted stuff that I've been listening to, she really kind of like tears apart these cases and it's very, very interesting. Up and Vanished is another one about people who it's like real-time investigations that are really fascinating. And then TV wise, we just watched, I'm always looking for like 30-minute crime shows. Because that's like the perfect amount of time, like that I need. Like I just need 30 minutes to watch a crime show, and so of course I've done Forensic Files, I've done all of like the cold case files, but I found one that's called I Met My Murderer Online, and it was weird, but like I was like okay, like I'm here for it. I think the experts that were interviewed were a little bit too animated, like they were talking like this every time the camera was on them. But the crime itself was very interesting, how they used technology to like track what was going on. So again, I Met My Murderer Online. Fun stuff. JC, what about you?
So first off, I do have to ask Sarah, the Fox Hollow murders on Hulu.
Okay.
That's based on a true crime thing.
Ooh.
And the reason I bring it up is it went down in Westfield, Indiana, which is like a half an hour north of me.
Oh, love it.
So it's like, yeah, that was crazy.
What was it? Fox?
The Fox Hollow murders.
Fox
and it's
Hollow.
on Hulu.
Okay.
So yeah. I haven't watched it because you know me, I true crime scares me. So so instead I have been reading, because it's been cold, Don't Stop the Carnival. It's a 1965 novel by the legendary historical fiction author Herman Wouk. And the reason that I picked it up is because it's the story of a New York press agent who goes and escapes to a Caribbean island and tries to run a hotel there. And the reason that I found out about it is because in the 90s, Jimmy Buffett, who everybody who knows me knows, I adore Jimmy Buffett, approached Herman Wouk and said, let's turn this story into a musical. And so they did. And so there was originally, I first heard about it Don't Stop the Carnival as a musical and a Jimmy Buffett record, and now I'm finally getting around to reading the book.
Oh,
and
that's so cool.
so it's a lot of fun. It's been a total escape, which is what I've really been needing. As far as also what I've been listening to, because I'm doing the commute, and so I'm doing audiobooks. Holding. Holding. It is a cozy mystery written and narrated by Graham Norton. And I just love Graham Norton. He is absolutely delightful. I didn't know that he was an author until my wife told me about it. And she said she listened to, I think, like an autobiography or something like that by him. And he has 3 or 4 stories set in this cute little Irish village. And so I'm listening to him do the narration. Of course, he's just delightful and he's fabulous. And it's just, I'm just having a great time. And you just imagine Graham Norton on the page, and it's just like that. So
How did I not know that he writes cozy mysteries?
I didn't know either. So yeah. And
wow. I'm going
So
I'll have to listen to those because I love him.
Yes. Yeah. He's a lot of fun. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Linda, this has just been fabulous. It's been too long since we got to catch up with you, but this has been great. So with the new book coming out here in no time at all, can you let people know like where they can find you online? Do you have any blog tours, or there in your neck of the woods? Will you be doing any, any personal things, or just in general, how can folks keep up with you?
Well, the book, of course, is available on Amazon. You can pre-order it now. This is my first foray into promotion in a long time, so I don't have much else set up at this point. But I do have a newsletter that I send out every month. And if you would like to sign up for my newsletter, you can go to my website, which is very easy. It's Linda Norlander.
Okay.
.com. And you can sign up for the newsletter, and it kind of tells you what's going on in my life and in my writing. And Sarah, I just wanted to say this. I'm now working on the 3rd Sheriff Red novel, and the character in there who is a true crime podcaster who is throwing a wrench into some things that are going on in Likens Lake.
I can imagine. Because I am listening, the podcast I'm listening to right now is called The Next Call, and it's about this Canadian filmmaker who he's since become like a really good investigative podcaster with like actually solving cold cases. And the way that he kind of badgers the police, he does it very politely, I think, but you can tell that they're like, oh gosh, not another podcaster getting involved with this. But
please go away.
Yeah, but like but then this particular case that he's working on, they're like, we know your track record, like we know that people talk to you. So like we're hoping that like us kind of partnering with you will work out. So I'm excited to see how Red ends up working either against or with a podcaster. So that's really cool to look forward to.
Or if Linda, the author, just kills her off.
Yes, that's always a solution for us. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to kill him off. Well, Linda, I hope that you will come back when the second book, The Pines We're Watching. I hope you'll come back and chat with us about that when the time comes, because it would be great to see how Red is evolving, to see who else's heads we might be getting into while we're in Likens Lake. And of course, it's always wonderful to catch up with you. So I hope you'll swing by and say hello. For our wonderful viewers who joined us here live this evening, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate you telling us how you weather the cold, and that everybody does it better than I do, apparently. I just like break out in hives and just am miserable in the cold. So but thanks to global warming, we're having 60-degree weather already. So it's always something. Got to look on the bright side. But folks, thank you so much again for being here with us. Next week, we have a bookish moment on Tuesday, the 18th at 4:30 p.m. with author Lynn Bohart. Lynn, actually, she was here, I think almost a year ago now, talking about her group of sleuths that are all, I believe they were in either their 70s or their 80s. And so she is going to be back chatting about that group of wonderful friends with us. And then on Thursday, the 20th at 8 o'clock, we're going to be joined by Mary Seifert on a Bookish Hour. So we'll have plenty of things going on next week. You can sign up for email reminders at our website. It's bookishtime.com. Again, Linda, thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful to chat with you. And we wish you the very, very best with this release. It's a fabulous book. And I'm really excited for folks to be able to get to meet Sheriff Fred.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So everybody, enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a wonderful weekend. And until we see you next time, stay bookish. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.